Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Doing Well, the Wellbeing Science Insights Podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We're champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Lu Ngo, coming to your ears from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's learn together. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Doing Well. And on this week's episode, we are going to talk about creating a culture of connection in the workplace. And I have a very lovely guest in our studio, actually in person with us today, Anetta Pizag. Anetta is a workplace consultant and researcher at Athena Blue Global. She helps create human-centric workplaces that make it easier to tackle the challenges of work while maintaining a healthy body and mind. By collaborating closely with leaders and teams, she also develops tailored work practices that make work a positive and rewarding experience. Anetta's first book, Create a Thriving Workspace, presents powerful tools for designing spaces where work communities and businesses flourish. And her second book, 35 Smart Choices, offers practical advice on how you can play to your strengths, find your flow, and improve the quality of your work and your life through working smarter, not harder. Thank you so much for joining us, Anetta.
Thank you, Lu, for having me. Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Oh, I'm so glad because, I know that even in the same city, sometimes it's hard to make things happen, right? And I'm just glad that you made it all the way here to our studio to join our podcast. So I'm curious because, you've got a very interesting career so far from what I see, helping organizations and even individuals and, not just thrive professionally, but also seems like it has a bit of an individual approach as well, where it comes to mind and body, you include that in your work. So why did you choose this line of work and how did you get here in your career?
This point where I'm at in my career, in this point of time, it's really just part of a journey and I could never really see the entire path ahead. I could always see only the next step, and that's where it was leading me. I studied architecture and building engineering in Hungary, and at that time my focus was all about creating buildings that are spectacular, that they have a very harmonious relationship with their environments. But the focus of those buildings was less on human experience and more on functionality and aesthetics. A few years after into working as an architect, I find myself being increasingly interested in environmental sustainable performance of buildings. So for a few years, I worked as an environmental consultant, specifically focusing on how to create buildings that are better for the environment, the natural environment primarily. And I felt that there was a bit of a hole in the focus in the industry on not having strong enough priorities on creating buildings that allow people to thrive. There was a lot of focus on energy efficiency, water efficiency, waste management, and so on. But what's the point of creating a wonderfully well-engineered building if people in there cannot be their best selves? And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of examples of buildings that were designed like this, so I thought, there must be a better way to go about it. Not necessarily a better way, but a perspective that I can bring in that needs more attention. And this is how I ended up turning my attention towards workplace strategy, which in simple terms means creating physical spaces and work practices that allow people to be their best selves.
Yeah. I see. I mean, that's very interesting of a start, considering where you are now, because you look at the space and then you think about the people within the space. So you kind of moved from, the overarching environment to actually like the intangible environment that people are in too. Because, looking at a space, I think it's interesting, right? You walk into a building or you look into a space and you're kind of like, oh, I guess people here are so and so. And then you actually see the interaction and you're kind of like, oh, it's not how I would imagine it. And I say this because I used to work in a co-working space, right? And it looks like everyone's really friendly and, like hanging out quite a bit and really social there. But I feel like a lot of the times I felt out of place because it's designed for extroverts. And I was an introvert. I didn't really got how people just clicked with everybody there. And, it's just so easy to make conversations and I just didn't want to. And they had a lot of activities that kind of because it's a co-working space, had a lot of activities that kind of okay, let's bring everyone together. But then even the little teams within that building, they're not really bonding, but they're bonding with other people in other teams, in other companies. So I find that to be very interesting. I guess in a way they're fostering connections within other teams too, but only if everyone from the same team shows up to that event, right? Otherwise, if you're the only one from your company that shows up at a social event in that community space, you essentially building connections with people from another company and not your own team. And that was so interesting to me. So I guess what you are doing is interesting in that sense because I thought about it, a long time ago, but never really looked into it.
I think what you're mentioning is certainly your experience is in many ways unique, but I believe that in many ways it's quite common as well.
Yeah.
I'm an introvert as well, and there is a lot of focus on creating workspaces that are all about connectivity in the sense that you feel really exposed all the time and you have nowhere to retreat. And funnily enough, when these efforts to create connection between people are approached in an unskillful way, forcing it too much, people actually withdraw and they get into their bubbles, they put on their headphones, and they give out signals to leave me alone. And it's actually been measured in certain workspaces that forcing people to, be in the same space and taking away the opportunity from them to find some privacy actually backfired. What you're talking about also in the sense of having a workspace that fosters social activities and it's more designed for extroverts. I think probably that's fairly common as well. And only recently there is increasing attention among designers and strategists to find a better balance between spaces that are designed for connection and spaces that are designed for focus and or just simply relaxing. But also it's a combination of the space and practices and routines. Even if something is not quite right about the design, there is so much that people themselves can do to make sure that everybody is truly included, regardless of their needs for social interaction.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I think that also is something that we'll consider in our conversation later when we talk about workplace culture and, connection and environment, because I think it's a very interesting idea and notion where a lot of the activities designed for this kind of nurture is mainly designed for extroverts, and I personally struggled as an introvert earlier in my career. Now I don't necessarily have to do that. And, the virtual work environment sort of helps a little bit, but we'll talk about that in the later part of the podcast. For now, we have a section called Have You Met Anetta? And we're going to get to know you through some of your favorite things. Okay. My first question to you is, I know you're a book author, but what is your favorite book to read?
Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. It's a science fiction book. And there was a time in my late teens, early 20s when I was reading a lot of science fiction. And recently I'm more focused on nonfiction books. And part of me is really missing the time that I feel I should be able to spend with fiction. What I find fascinating about science fiction, and in particular about Ray Bradbury's work in general, that he uses science to create a universe that allows himself to be free to explore the human conditions. And many of his stories take place in Mars, But the stories are not really about science. The stories are about what happens when you put people in a new environment, when they set their own rules, and in which direction stories are going to go. I felt that I learned more about human psychology and emotions through his book than I could learn later in life through psychology books.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. I mean, we do learn a lot from science fictions. I love sci-fi books. I used to read a lot of those as well, but then now I've kind of stopped. So that's a good recommendation. Thank you for sharing. What about a movie you've been enjoying recently?
I love The Past Lives. It's a movie that came out towards the end of last year. And I don't know to how much details I should go into describing the movie to people who hasn't seen it. It's really about two people who had a close connection when they were 12-year-old, reconnect when they are 24, and then reconnect again when they are 36, and explore the possibilities of how life could have turned out for them if they don't make the decision. The family of the girl had made the decision to move from Asia to America, and this is how these two beautiful little children got separated from each other physically and in every other possible way. How life would have turned out for them if the girl doesn't go away with her family. What would have happened if 12 years later they reconnect and they pursue that connection rather than bringing it to a stop? What I love about this movie that there is so much communicated without words. It's beautifully acted and directed. I really don't think that me talking more about this movie would do any justice. If anybody is interested in, human emotions and connection, I strongly recommend them to watch it.
Yeah, thank you. I've never watched that movie, but it sounds beautiful, so I will check that out. So I wonder if you're also a podcast listener. I mean, you're a podcast guest today. Some of our podcast guests are actually not podcast listeners. If you are, which show is your favorite?
I can't really decide between Huberman Lab and Rich Roll. I wouldn't say that I'm feeling very loyal to any particular podcast. I choose them quite randomly, but most of the time, the way it happens, for example, I read an amazing book called Stolen Focus by Johan Hari.
Yeah, I love that.
And then I saw Johan Hari having an interview with Rich Roll. And that's how I found out about Rich Roll. And then I watched more of Rich Roll podcasts because I really enjoy them. And then one of the Rich Roll podcasts was with Andrew Huberman. And then I really enjoyed that conversation. And I checked out what Andrew Huberman does. And that's how I explore and discover people that I believe are worth listening to. One of the things that I really enjoy about both podcasts, they are long-form conversations. 2 hours. Many of them 3 hours long. And a lot of people feel they don't have that much time for having conversations of this length. But I feel that really long conversations are a really great way to slow down and going deeply into subjects. Funnily enough, getting to know people better, which is what we are talking about today.
Yeah.
And also bring out, pull out of the habit of doing activities that are all about shortening our attention span, like watching very, very short videos or tweets or sound bites. So I'm very conscious that digital lifestyle, what it's doing to my attention span and other aspect of how I think and feel. And sometimes I tell myself, let's just set a few hours aside. And I feel that it's very healthy for the soul to do that.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with that. So I wonder if you have a role model in life and maybe multiple role models in life. And if so, who are they?
I don't feel that I have role models in particular. There are a few people in my life that whenever I can make a decision, I sort of check in with myself how how they would see the decision, whether they would approve it. But there are certain traits that I find that the people that I admire have. And some of those traits involve being able to keep their humility while they are succeeding in what they do, and being able to have very strong boundaries in the way they look after themselves. When I was still at university, I was working in the Netherlands for a few months in the summer.
Yeah.
And the director of a very successful architectural business went home at 5 p.m. every single time to be with his family. And he didn't see that either as lazy work ethic or this being in conflict with him running a successful architectural firm. Architecture happens to be one of those professions where people are notoriously working late hours and weekends. So seeing him, how he approached his work, that was for me very inspiring. And I know a few other people who are, it's probably the common way of saying it is work hard, play hard. It's not really my phrase, but it really well summarizes what I'm trying to say. Do your best job and then take a break. Look after yourself and nurture your hobbies. And I believe that goes very well hand in hand with great work ethics.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. You draw a lot of inspiration from different people, right? And they probably don't get labeled as role models per se, but we learn a lot from people in life. So I like that aspect of it. Now, speaking of learning from people, we also learn from courses. And I wonder which course you've taken that has meant a lot to you and has really inspired you so far in life.
Well, there is this company called This Human, which is run by Melissa Nova, who is a human experience designer. And his course focuses on who you need to be a great designer. It's called the Design Character course. And design is a very broad term in this context. You don't need to be a graphic designer or an architect. All you need to do is care about some important issues and be in a position to contribute to solutions to solving those issues. I completed this course about a year ago. It's 8 mornings with a small team, completed online. And we were exploring subjects like, what does ethic mean to you? What are your values? How do you grow your knowledge? What are your takes on power dynamics?
Yeah.
It was all about internal work and conversations with our team members. It's all about learning from ourselves. And I find that genuinely transformational.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. Human experience and human experience design. That's a new concept to me. So that's cool. Thank you for sharing that. I think we've got to know you way better now. And let's talk about today's topic. I think a lot of the things that you shared are kind of related to today's topic. So I would love to hear your insights. Before we get into, the part where we actually discuss the nitty-gritty of creating a culture of connection in the workplace, let's talk about well-being, because that's what we're here for. So what does well-being mean to you personally?
For me, well-being means feeling well. If you want to distill it down to the simplest form, feeling well in terms of how you feel physically, what's your health, your level of comfort, whether you feel well in relation to your spiritual life, in relation to your career, in relation to other people as well. So it's a holistic concept. It has many facets. In the context of workplace, well-being means knowing that you are in a right place, knowing that you are your best selves, and most importantly, your actions are not creating conflict. You can simultaneously produce value and at the same time enrich your own life.
Yeah. I think it's a concept that a lot of people think about on the daily, but don't really get to define it. So I think your definition is interesting in the sense that it's kind of like it's personal to you, right? And you also, I think you've also worked with a lot of individuals and organizations, and in helping them with just being better in the workplace and have this better culture. I think a big part of that is also understanding how they view well-being and how to help them improve their well-being. So I wonder, from that perspective, what do you think people tend to get wrong when it comes to thinking about well-being?
A few things. I love the title of the podcast, Doing Well. I find the phrase well-being itself already problematic.
Yeah.
Because well-being is a noun, it's static. It's also something you can't touch, hear, see. Well-being, when you nurture this concept and value it, it's a very active way of being. It's full of motion. Doing well-being is not really what English language says. But in practice, when you are taking care of yourself and creating the right environment for others to feel well, you are creating things. So first and foremost, I would initiate some change to the way we use our language. And I did have conversations about people who felt very confused about the meaning of well-being. And we started to change the language around. They created their own definition, but they certainly ended up with a much clearer understanding of what well-being actually means. Other obstacles that I find is time pressure. And it's so rare to find an organization where people feel they have more time than what they need to complete what they need to complete.
Yeah.
So what gets pushed to the bottom of the priority list is investing in relationships. Conversations are cut short. When people meet, they jump straight on the business part of things. And they don't leave time for relationship building, which is a sad thing, because when people have built stronger relationship and stronger human capital in organization, that have the most amazing benefits. It leads to better problem solving, more efficient communication, more trust. People are more likely to help each other out.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's good that you kind of tie it into our topic today, because a lot of people, when they talk about well-being and misconceptions about well-being, it's kind of like this generic view in life, which is fair enough, because we're talking about well-being in life. But I think work is a very important part of life, and we probably don't talk about work enough, even though we spend a lot of time at work. And our well-being is directly affected by how our work is going, right? And sometimes we don't have these conversations even with ourselves. And I think that's really kind of dangerous, because, we kind of like, okay, I have to do my job, right? And I'm just going to keep going no matter how I feel. And that's not healthy, and that's not good for our well-being. And this culture of connection in the workplace, it's definitely going to impact our well-being, which is why we chose it as a topic. But to help our audience understand it a bit better, how would you define a culture of connection in the workplace?
In a workplace with a strong culture of connection, people feel safe to bring their whole selves to work. A lot of people love the idea of bringing your whole selves to work, and some leaders find it problematic because their understanding is that people will start to bring activities and mindset into a workplace that's not appropriate in a professional setting. In my mind, bring your whole selves to work means that you don't need to put on an attitude, a face that feels alien to you in order to feel accepted. A culture of connection manifests in people feeling that they belong. Brené Brown talks in great detail about belonging. And he makes a distinction that belonging is the opposite of fitting in. When you belong, you can be yourself and be accepted for who you are. In a workplace that values connection, people trust one another, they treat each other the way they would like to be treated. They say thank you, that they say sorry when something goes wrong. A lot of organizations have an environment where people see each other as friends or family. Again, some leaders feel a little bit unsure about seeing people as friends or family members is appropriate. I think it should come down to the organizations and its teams itself to define how they describe ideally relationships at work. Having said that, there are studies that clearly shows that in organizations with the highest levels of engagement, people tend to say that they have at least one friend at work. And this is really helping. And it's also a safe environment where people feel it's okay to talk about problems, to provide critical feedback, and to share ideas that sound a little bit crazy, and they know that they won't be shot down for that.
Yeah, definitely. It's quite challenging to get there, though, right? Especially because when you have a diverse team, I think it's going to be a lot of learning how to make it a space where everyone feel belonged and not like they're just fitting in. Because I think it takes a lot of acceptance and understanding from everybody else. Like I talked to my friend the other day, and she was saying that she just joined this new organization recently, and she brought her whole self to work because she thought that it was safe, and turns out it wasn't. So I guess that kind of being open and learning about other people, it is a very big factor too. If you bring your full self because you think you can, but the culture of the workplace, it says that we are inclusive and we want you to feel belong, but then the reaction is kind of not the same. It doesn't match, and I feel like that's really going to affect a person's well-being especially when they first start a new job. There's already a lot of learning, and they're going to feel unsafe, I think. So if we have the opposite of that, have that culture, that workplace culture where we foster connection with others, then I think we can enhance our well-being in many ways, because we as humans want to feel belonged. And I think we spend so much time at work that if we don't feel belonged at work, it's a very problematic aspect in our life. And sometimes when we don't talk about it, it's even worse. So what do you think about this? Because I'm sure you've worked with a lot of organizations to change this before. So how does it go in organizations in general?
First, responding to your story about the lady who thought that bringing her whole self to work is safe. I really feel for her. It's when you bring your whole self to work, you make yourself vulnerable. And then whether you're humiliated or isolated, one way or another, it can be quite painful. And if it happens perhaps more than one, then you suddenly find yourself in a genuinely safe environment. It's going to take a really, really long time for you to actually give yourself the permission to become vulnerable again.
Yeah.
I had similar experiences as well. In terms of creating practices that nurture a culture of connection, is it hard? If you think very deeply about it, we can make it a bit complicated, but in a sense, it's actually not very difficult. Laughter, jokes, playing, they instantly create connection between people. I remember meeting people for the first time, and as soon as we shook hands, somebody was cracking a joke.
Okay.
And that set the tone for our relationship. I never felt nervous around that person ever again. Other ways to create a connection is simply spending just a little bit of time. And I'm concerned I might be repeating himself, but it's incredibly important. And at the same time, it's pretty foundational to sit down with people and talk.
Yeah.
Not forced conversations. It doesn't need to be awkward. Just find out what the other person is passionate about, what they are interested in. and allow the conversation to go wherever it wants to go. It really doesn't need to be about business. And it could be a 5-minute conversation before a meeting. It could be a lunchtime catch-up. Or it could be a day when the entire company decides to spend some time together and doing some fun activities.
Yeah.
Talking again about Brené Brown, she mentions how important it is to share emotionally charged experiences with one another, to build a culture, to build connection with others.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even have to involve talking. It might be attending events together.
Yeah. So you sort of pointed out a few elements there, right? To build that and foster that culture of connection at work. The examples you gave was, jokes, making jokes there, sharing similar experiences. I think that kind of applies to a lot of situations, and I think it's important. But what other factors would you say to be some of the key elements that would contribute to this, aspect of fostering a culture in the workplace where it fosters connection and it fosters this social well-being in, anyone? And also tricky, I'll add something on top of that. Key elements in both the traditional workplace where you go to work and you see people face to face and virtual workplaces. Would there be a difference?
Absolutely, there would be a difference. Let's talk about the easier part, in person.
Yeah.
I know of companies where meeting starts over the football table.
Okay.
And what's fantastic about that when you are playing games, and there are many other ways to go about this. But when you are playing games, hierarchies dissolve. And you treat your boss and your team members the same way. Being able to put hierarchies aside and have conversations where everybody has an equal voice and everybody is listened to. I think that's a very important aspect to build a connection between people. Also recognizing the fact that some people need more privacy than others. And the best workplaces allow people to move away from others. Because if your favorite colleague has the smelliest lunch every day, eating next to you at the desk, or eating too loudly, or whistling, or humming, no matter how much you like those people, you will start to develop some negative feelings towards them.
Yeah.
But if the workplace is designed so you can just go to the next room, find your privacy and focus without being disturbed by those around you, then this sort of, little annoyances stop being a problem. Transparency is very important in organizations to ensure that people trust each other. You don't want gossips to keep traveling around the company. And when people are not giving clear information about decisions that are impacting to them, gossips are born and they start to travel. Again, I understand that in corporate environments, there are certain secrets, there are certain confidential issues. But people need to know about decisions that impact them. What's their role in impacting those decisions? Who is making those decisions? When that will happen? And whether their input will be considered. It's also very healthy for building better relationship between bosses and managers, leaders, and their team members.
Yeah.
Talking about virtual environment, you can always call people and ask them how they are. Again, it's non-scientific, but it's sometimes the most powerful ideas, strategies are the ones that are most common sense. Again, spend a few minutes before the meeting when you catch up with people, ask them how their weekend was, how they are feeling, if they have any issues, if they need any help, if they have any concerns. You can create really interesting, fun activities online as well. With my team, we catch up every week or 2 weeks, and we start every catch up with a little quiz. Again, it takes 5 minutes, but it breaks the ice. It puts us in a better mood. We learn something about each other. And again, it dissolves hierarchies beautifully. Whenever there is a chance, I really suggest distributed teams to meet in person. And the brain works physically when you connect with somebody in person in relation to the virtual space. Just about this, I could talk for hours, how much research supports this. But when people meet in person, relationship building is much quicker. And in many organizations, people should be able to get together physically, whether it's once a week, once a month, once a year, whatever is suitable. I'm feeling really, really pumped up, having just returned from Hawaii meeting with my team for the first time. We spent 4 days doing nothing else, just getting to know each other better and talking about how we envision our business to progress this year and the coming years. This is the first time when I met many of my colleagues. Some of them are in the US and in Canada. Some of them are in New Zealand, different cities in Australia as well.
Yeah.
This is a big investment for a company. It's financially, but it's definitely having enormous paybacks.
But how can we measure it, right? Because I think a lot of companies would be hesitant to invest in things like social gatherings or activities that would get people together because they're kind of like, oh, that's a waste of time. Or, people should be spending time doing their work. And I know that the trend nowadays is actually better. Like a lot of companies and organizations actually investing in activities that would connect colleagues, but some are still hesitant. So to those that are still hesitant, how do we measure the impact and how can we convince them that it actually helps?
For those who are hesitant, I would start with activities that have little financial and time investment and big rewards. Some of them that we already talked about, really just allowing a little bit of time for people to chat.
Yeah.
And also to make sure that get-togethers are meaningful. This doesn't take too much time and effort when expecting people to show up in an office. Assuming that people being present in an office leads to better relationship building, it needs a little bit of planning. So people don't go to the office just to sit in their own bubbles all day long, going home, and then complaining about why they had to tackle public transport. It was having absolutely no point, which is a story I hear over and over again. So make a little bit of better planning of when people come together to make sure that they actually get the chance to connect. Ways of measuring human connection: surveys, engagement surveys, satisfaction surveys. They will give you really good feedback about where people are at. And there is also a lot of research showing that having great human connections in the workplace has many business benefits. So measuring satisfaction and engagement itself is a very good indicator of how people relate to their colleagues at work. You can look at the number of days that people spend homesick. And you would assume that people stay at home sick when they are sick. But when people really don't love being in the office, it's also shown that they spend much more days at work, at home, reporting sick than otherwise. You can measure it by looking at the dynamics of conversations at meetings. And in a healthy team, you will notice that the majority of the team members participate, and they participate roughly at equal rate. Everybody speaks, and nobody dominates a conversation. That's a really good measure of seeing how people connect at work, people's willingness to help each other out and go the extra mile. And it actually has a name. It's called organizational citizenship behavior. I can't exactly tell you how that's measured. It might be also via observation or studies. But it's shown that people who are high in this quality tend to bring a lot of value to organizations and to their teams. Now, something that I would like to talk about when we are talking about measurements. When you are looking you are catching up with your friends and something doesn't feel quite right, you won't feel the inclination to measure things. Or in your family or with your partner, something is off. You won't ask them to complete a survey and put a number against the quality of the relationship.
Yeah.
There are a lot of qualities that can be really well detected just by common sense and observation, as long as you know the people around you really well. And I met a lot of business owners who genuinely care about their team members, know every single individual in their team very well, and they have made the most successful business decisions year after year after year by listening to their gut and by knowing what people need and what they don't need. So really what I conclude from this and from observations of working with large and small organizations that the better a leader knows their team, the least they rely on quantifiable measures, and the more they use their gut feel to make really, really good decisions for everybody. In large corporate organizations, of course, it's very hard for a general manager to know their thousands of employees that work for him. But every manager should have the opportunity to get to know the immediate people who report to them and those that they report to.
Yeah.
I firmly believe that even in the largest organizations, if everybody put an effort into getting to know the people that they directly work with, then communication would transform, and that would massively elevate the organization's culture.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And it sounds like it doesn't come from just management, but also from everyone, every employee, because everyone can play a part in the puzzle, right? Because if you don't participate in getting to know your colleagues, then no matter how much you're encouraged to, it doesn't really work. And at the same time, what I'm hearing from you is, that you might have a workplace culture that is not quite there yet, but individuals can also do their own things. For example, they can reach out to their colleagues. If it's a remote team, even more important to call, like you were saying, to check in. And that would help to nurture that, culture of connection in the workplace. And I think it doesn't mean they always have to sit back and wait for their leaders or managers to do this. They can do that themselves, right?
Absolutely spot on. All of us have the power to bring our passion for relationships and our commitment and our ethics and create change in our own little circles, or maybe not so little circles. It's not just an investment. It's actually something that, people start to relax about it. That's fun.
Yeah.
That makes work joyful.
Yeah.
To show up at work, whether in person or virtually, and talk to people and find out that you actually care about those people and those people care about you, and you are sort of friends one way or another.
Yeah. And you boost productivity too. Like I feel like when you feel that sense of connection, you're way more productive. The same task can probably take less time because you feel engaged in the activities at work.
Most definitely, yes. You feel more motivated working towards a shared purpose with shared values. And even when you are working together, it's so much easier, to be productive and have effective collaboration. One thing that's really interesting that, again, shows by science that the most productive teams are those that are very diverse. And what's interesting about that diverse teams tend to have disagreements.
Yeah.
They tend to have conflicts.
Yeah.
They have differences of opinions. Still, if it's a strong team and people care about each other, they will feel very safe to raise different opinions and debate.
Yeah.
And the best innovations and solutions will emerge from those debates, as opposed to people with similar thinking getting together, they all loving each other and having all the same thinking. That's not going to be a very innovative way of working together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really important. And I guess, the other part of the picture is also how we introduce this as well, because I think it will be very funny if one day out of nowhere, a company just goes, okay, let's get everybody to connect. And, there's sort of like no program per se, and it's random. And so I think the approach here might need to be specific. Like I'm guessing you need to get to know the team first get to know the current problems that they have, because they might be disconnected from one another. And for whatever reason that might be, you need to dig out the reason to address it, because I don't think we can go from a dysfunctioning team to a socially connected team. We need to kind of go from a dysfunctioning team to a normally functioning team and then socially connected. Like, we cannot skip the steps, is what I'm trying to kind of gauge.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree. You go from a dysfunctional team to a normal team by finding common ground, by finding all that you agree on, by defining a shared purpose that everybody is passionate about, and defining the values. And your individual values don't need to 100% mirror your team's values, but there needs to be alignment. If there is no alignment, it's something that needs to be addressed. And once you feel safe, this is when you take the next step and start to explore how the team operates when there are conflicts, when there are disagreements. And one interesting thing is talking about, also signals of strong teams, that in many well-functioning teams, people swear. And they take the piss out of each other. And that's a sign that people trust each other. They understand the boundaries. And they also know that they can push each other's buttons without the other person misinterpreting the intentions.
Yeah. I think it can be... it can work both ways. Like, sometimes people start swearing when they're frustrated and they just don't work well together. But on other occasions, some other times, I feel like when they're comfortable enough, they can start swearing, not at each other, but at something like a common problem, for example. This probably happens for teams that are dealing with a lot of clients, and of course it has to come with boundaries. It's not like you can just swear anytime and, it's kind of like the norm. But I also feel like if you can swear at certain situation, and that it's kind of within the boundary of, okay, we know that this is a situation that we're all frustrated about and we're swearing because of that. It's like a common enemy, but not each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You want to create an environment when you don't need to put enormous amount of effort of filtering what you can or cannot say.
Yeah.
You want to have a healthy level of filter.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to come across as a psychopath.
Yeah.
But it's actually very enjoyable, and in those companies, people love to go to work and meet their teams because they feel that work is not that much like work.
Yeah.
I know how cheesy that sounds, saying that work doesn't feel like work.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that you talk to people, I talk to people, and I experience it in certain environments.
Yeah.
Where I just couldn't wait to, just go and solve problems together and have
every
fun.
day is a new day. Like, it's exciting, and you can't wait to go and deal with whatever it is. I would love to have that too, because it's kind of like this important aspect of well-being, because you work every day and you wake up and you have your routine, and the first thing you do is you kind of think about going to work. So I think we've covered quite a bit of theory here, and if we missed out on anything, would love for you to throw it in. But let's talk about something more practical. So feel free to throw in more insights in this practice section too, because I think this is important. A lot of our audience members might be wondering, okay, I hear you, it's important to build a work environment that is socially connected, and, that's going to boost our well-being. But how do we actually do that? Let's say from our perspective, an everyday person listening to this, they might not have a leadership role. They might be just a regular employee. What would you say to be a practice that they can engage in to foster that connectivity and connection in their workplace?
But there is one practice that I recently found out about, and it's very simple. It was initiated by leaders, but it can also be initiated by individuals. And the practice is that you are going to a shared part of your office, whether it be a dining space or a lounge or a relaxation area. And there are ways to signal to people around you whether you are happy to be approached or not. It could be just a card and turning it, green or red, whatever that is. And apparently in that company that introduced this practice, the connections between teams that don't normally work together, that improved significantly, almost doubled, as a result of this very, very simple practice. Other companies choose to have dining tables that are larger, so people are forced to sit and share the table with others rather than sitting them by themselves. And even if you are not the person who is designing that dining room in your office, maybe you can just ask the person who is already sitting at the table whether they are happy for you to join. Allow 5-10 minutes before and after meetings for conversations. Again, it's something that I mentioned, but it's very simple, and it's not only helpful for relationship buildings, but it's also helpful to allow your mind to recharge between meetings, because having back-to-back meetings, especially when they're virtual, they are known to be very exhausting, and your focus and your productivity will drop if you don't allow yourself to take breaks. I know CEOs who made a commitment to meet with every single person working in their companies for half an hour lunch catch-up. And maybe they spent 200 lunches in a year with 200 different employees. They said that now they know their people much better, these CEOs. And I imagine it's a different organization. I only hope that other leaders, managers in the same company also find this example inspiring. When a leader embraces this purpose of nurturing connections within the organization, it's especially powerful because it's something that can much more easily spread to employees. If leaders don't engage in these practices, it's much harder to create a culture where team members still invest the time and effort.
Yeah, definitely. It's important to do that. And I think it's just carving out time. And a lot of the times, leaders or CEOs in particular, they don't have time, or they assume they don't. But actually spending time like this is really important. And I think the equivalent of this in the virtual workplace, even the practice of, giving a signal of whether you want to be approached or not. In the virtual workplace, I see this in my team quite a bit, and I think this is to be a good practice. So on Slack, we have different statuses we can put on, and I see a lot of team members who they use funny emojis. First of all, could be anything. It could be like like a crying cat as an emoji, and they're saying, "Focus time, please don't approach," or focus time. We'll be slow in response. So it's kind of like all these little things help. And sometimes I myself forget to do that. But I think it's so cool in the virtual workplace, right? Because you can't really have like a conversation or like design cars you can flip over. But you do have that tool of whatever communication tool you're on. And you sort of switch it a little bit up and share whatever it is that you're working on. You might be busy. You might want to be approached. Or, you might be out right now. Because a lot of people in the virtual workspace, it's kind of like, oh, I don't know where that colleague is. I thought they're online. Well, they could be online, but you don't hear from them. I'm one of those people, actually. I should do that right after this conversation. I think if there are any other practices for virtual workspaces, that would be really helpful, because I think the in-person one, even though is challenging, it's also easier to navigate in a sense of how you can nurture that for people, because you can read signs, you can actually see facial expressions and, know how they work. But in the virtual workplace, it's so different because, most people are by themselves with their computer. Unless, you're on a meeting with them, you probably don't know what they've been up to or how they feel about the task at hand or how they feel about the environment in the first place.
One thing that you can do is set up a social channel specifically dedicated for non-work-related conversations. And once that channel is up there, then people feel much more free, and they will feel invited to share stuff that a joke, a funny meme, a story that has nothing to do with work. It can gain really good dynamics. And this is also something that I witnessed in my own practices, that these conversations, you never know which direction they go. Other thing you can do is, again, have social activities online And this will require some creativity, and this requires some experimentation, because some companies have, quiz nights, or they have virtual lunches and drinks, or they have pajama parties. And in some cultures, they sound terribly techy. In some other cultures, they sound like fun.
Yeah.
It's worth, trying to do a few things. There are so many different ways you can connect with people online. I'm member of a network of consultants with members all over the world. The primary purpose of this network is to come together every month and just share knowledge, learn from each other. We are doing similar sort of work. But once or twice a year, we get together virtually and we play games. Some of them are the virtual version of Pictionary. And we just laugh,
Yeah,
and
fun.
I've been a member of this group for quite some time, for years, but I only met one person face to face, and it's like 15 of us.
Yeah.
And I think of every single one of them as friends, because we just, every single time we meet, we spend some time, talking about things that are important to us, not just about business. But a couple of times a year, we just play. And playing brings out a certain attitude of people that colleagues can't see. We did lots of games during this 4-day event with my teammates just recently. And it was amazing to see how competitive everybody was. And even the people in the team who knew everybody else quite well, working with everybody else for months or years, they were surprised how competitive everybody was. And then we just needed to have a quiz night for this to, come to the surface.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, so many things we can learn from, and it depends on the time zone, the type of work, and you can even probably build activities based on the work itself, but not make it all about work. Like I remember someone told me about this game that this company had, and I think it's quite funny. It's basically match your colleague with their baby photo.
Yeah.
And, it's like a 50 people in a room kind of thing. And then you just mash them with a baby photo, or like mash them with a photo of their sibling or parents as well. It's quite fun. And you get to know your colleagues better through that way. It's not like a random game about something else, but it's actually about the people that you're engaging with. And that's, I think, a good way and a fun way to learn more about your colleagues. So yeah, I think that's kind of something that I would throw in. It's quite fun there. But I think we've mentioned quite a few practices and we're kind of out of time. So before we close, we have open mic. Now, I know we didn't get to run through all the questions. You might want to share a bit more insights about today's topic, or you might have other things that you would like to share with our audience. So this is your open mic. Anetta, go for it.
Open mic. I hope you don't mind if I introduce my 2 books.
Yeah, go for it. This is what it's for.
Create a Thriving Workspace. I wrote it and published it in 2015. Actually, I've been writing it for 3 years. And Create a Thriving Workspace is all about how to create a physical environment that allows people to work productively and effectively while having a lot of fun. And primary audience of this book is business leaders, managers, team leaders, and designers who want to be able to make better decisions about how their physical space is designed and organized and used. And this is my youngest baby, 35 Smart Choices. It was published just over 2 years ago. I wrote a large part of it during the COVID crisis. Again, that's a result of 3 years research. And the subtitle is Bring Out the Best in Yourself and Your Team Through Powerful Decisions About When, Where, and How You Work. This book is all about making decisions around what you already have. Even if you work in a large organization and you have set work practices and you can't influence your space, you still have a lot of choices. the choice comes down. Do you work sitting down or standing up? Do you do certain tasks from home or from the office? Do you listen to music while you work, or you work in silence? When you have face-to-face meetings with your colleagues, and when you get together virtually. And there are so many different ways we can do. When I was researching this book, I've learned so much. It's a book it's something that I wanted to read. I don't know if you have any particular questions about this.
Where can they find out more about your book if they want to get your book? Where should they go?
My website, pizag.com.au/books.
Cool.
So that's where you can find them. Talking about the second book, it also includes a series of exercises that people can do in relation to any particular subject. Where to meet, for example, what is the ideal meeting space for a particular conversation? What is the ideal meeting space for building better relationships? Actually, I've written a chapter about that. What sort of traits need to be in place in a team for a team to work really well together, and how to create the right conditions for teams to become stronger. So a lot of what we are talking about today is covered in this book. And the main idea is that I'm not giving people an answer. I don't tell anybody how to work, what to do in particular. I give them what's shown by research, what's shown by experience. There are tendencies and there are patterns that can be observed by science. But I genuinely believe that it needs to be the team and the individual at the end of the day to decide what are the work practices that are particularly great for them. Let me just share an example with you.
Yeah.
Some organizations have a strong belief that when they work in a hybrid team and some people are at home and some people in the office, to give everybody an equal experience, even those people who are in the office, they disperse into different spaces and log into the meetings from their own laptops. And there are other organizations who believe that the best way to tackle this is to gather everybody together in person, because there are immense benefit of having conversations face-to-face. And then those people who are not present in the office, they will join online. And the experience is not going to be equal for everybody, but there will be certain benefits that would be missed out if everybody were logging in through their own laptops. And there are two camps. And I do have a preference towards one of them. I have a preference towards bringing people together, even if it means that some people have an experience where they are sort of don't have an equal experience. But I can't tell any team that one is the right way to go about it and the other option is the wrong way to go.
Yeah.
So the key message in this book is really think about the way you work. Observe how different choices. Be aware of your choices first and foremost.
Yeah.
And there are lots of them, not 35, there are hundreds. I just needed to cut it down to something, manageable.
Yeah.
Be aware of your choices. Observe how different choices around the way you work impact your experience, your performance, how you feel, your work relationships. And be conscious about the way you design your own environment and practices to make sure that everybody is able to do their best work.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks so much for sharing your work and your books. And it sounds really important. And, I guess anyone who's keen to learn more about this topic can read your books to find out more. And thank you for joining our show. You have been listening to Doing Well, the Wellbeing Science Insights Podcast, produced by the Wellbeing Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, share, and subscribe to our channel so that other people can find it and we can continue to provide quality content. More of our work can be found on our website, we.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Lu Ngo. Thanks for tuning in.